Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology. Morning.
Good morning. First of June today.
1st of June, so first one of the month. So today we are going to talk. Actually, it's not that we're going to talk. We can't avoid talking about it because when we did the podcast last week, it was the day that Tommy Robinson got arrested, but we didn't have enough information on it. For those of you who don't know, Tommy Robinson is I'd almost call it a self-proclaimed journalist who was a founding member of the English Defence League, which has been branded as a far-right party, which I believe they are now. But he subsequently left because they crossed the line. Now, I don't know whether this Tommy Robinson, I've never met him. I don't particularly have any intentions or urge to want to meet him. However, one of the things is this: he got actually arrested last Friday. Is it last Friday? Yeah, he got arrested last Friday, standing outside Leeds Crown Court, and doing a Facebook Live, commenting on the I think it was the Rotherham sex ring. So if you don't know what that is, you're going to have to Google it. But he got arrested, and within a few hours, he was put in front of a judge with a public defender, and he was imprisoned for 13 months on contempt of court. Do you want to start us off on this? Do you know?
I don't know
much about this because I've got mixed feelings about this.
I don't know much about him. My only understanding is that he is the polar opposite in terms of emotional intelligence to Douglas Murray, who delivers a very similar message to Tommy Robinson, and essentially what they both do is they simply warn people of the problem of too much diversity in one culture, or we can also translate that into a lack of unity. Because unless you're unified as a culture, unless you have a common identity, you're going to have conflict. And most of the time, all they're doing is trying to warn us of this extremely important issue. But the difficulty is how they do it.
Well, yeah, I've got to say, I'm not sure whether they are the polar opposites, because, they're the polar opposites in terms of their upbringing. Because Douglas Murray comes across as very articulate, very well educated, and he delivers the same message far more gracefully, I suppose, than Tommy Robinson done, who's got brought up in Luton. Do you know why he's made almost racist comments in the past, or inappropriate comments in the past? He speaks with a quite common accent, is the best way to actually describe it, and he's not taken it seriously. But it's interesting that when they're both in front of the media, Tommy Robinson gets far more attacked by the media where Douglas Murray gets the opportunity to actually say what he wants to say, whereas Tommy Robinson gets shut down.
My guess, but again I haven't seen Tommy Robinson that much, as my guess is that whereas Douglas Murray is more educational and factual, I think it's all in the delivery, and I think Tommy Robinson has more what I call flappy tongue syndrome. It's slightly more disinhibited, so his delivery it seems at least to be targeted to inciting action on what he says, whereas Douglas Murray is more education and therefore not inciting, and therefore people feel they're allowed to make their own opinions. And of course the press love the idea of anyone inciting.
I've seen the media shut this Tommy Robinson down very quickly without giving him an opportunity to speak, hitting him with question after question without really giving an opportunity to answer. It's the same thing that Cathy Newman did to Jordan Peterson in some ways, where she wasn't really giving him the opportunity to actually say, to put what he was saying into context.
It's also the forum, so Douglas Murray will appear in lecture theatres,
expert panels, question time.
That's right.
And things like this.
Therefore, he has more of an air of authority, and if you have more authority, therefore your people are going to challenge you less.
Yes, but however, this podcast is not really about Tommy Robinson, even though I may come across it. It's about the action of the government in imprisoning him as quickly as they did, and why they did. And bearing in mind that you've got a judge who's supposed to be impartial in all these matters, who's really put a gag order on the whole situation to actually protect the government. So there's no exactly any impartiality as how the government have responded. And the thing is, I think they've made a huge mistake, because actually, I'm going to have to go back and say I think the government's been very weak in how they've actually handled it.
Well, they've been politically correct, which is weak.
Correct, which is proving to me more that the Tory party is more of a left-wing party than it is a right-wing party. Now, I've always been very clear that I am right-wing, but I've always been on the moderate side of that.
Well, the problem with politics is they want to appeal to the electorate, and that's why Labour became much more conservative, and now the Conservative becoming much more Labour.
And that's exactly what's happened. Well, the thing is, the Tories are actually probably where Labour used to be under Tony Blair, and Labour have gone back to almost towards bordering on socialism.
To the bordering on socialism, but also with elements of the far right, because of course there's a lot of controversy about anti-Semitic comments.
Of course. But the thing is, why did the government do what they did? So the thing is, what's happening is that you're going to get a lot of moderate people who are on the moderate right, who are concerned, which is why we had Brexit and things like this. Now, you're going to find themselves actually supporting the likes of this Tommy Robinson character, who's becoming almost a bit of a martyr for a movement that is unpolitically correct.
But that's the mistake they're making.
And that is the mistake that they're making. Because
I wouldn't have heard about him if you hadn't been arrested.
That's right. But it hasn't actually just stayed here. And like anything in this modern day society, in the modern world of technology, it has gone viral. I mean, you've got the likes of news commentator Tucker Carlson and Fox News in America actually commenting about it. There's been protests in Australia about it. There's been, again, I think it's also happened in Germany. I'm not sure about France, but there's been a lot of noise around the world. I mean, for God's sake, even Meghan Markle's sister has put on Twitter that, demanding the release of Tommy Robinson. I mean, how ridiculous is that? I mean, it's almost as ridiculous of the British going on a march opposing Donald Trump's presidency, as if it's got anything to do with us, as her demand for his release has got anything to do with, has anything to do with them. So it is bordering on stupidity, all this. And I've heard the likes of Owen Jones, who is a columnist for The Guardian. I mean, I don't even know how he ever got into how he's ever got a profile in this industry, because the crap that comes out of his mouth is really. I'm sounding really crass today, but he's just. I just totally can't understand how that man thinks.
See, whoever was following and trying to control Tommy Robinson from the establishment made the key error, even though they thought they were being clever in terms of plugging him into the legal system, which would then dispose of him. Because, of course, the first thing was having a court order telling him to cease and desist all such activities. And once they knew he wouldn't do it, then it was a very simple step to put him in prison, and they thought they would be above reproach because that's simple application of the law. However, they have fallen foul of the most basic concept of human behavior called mirror neurons. And what happens is we identify with people who are similar to us. So, for instance, when the government tried to make people smoke less, what they did is they put all these nasty pictures of lung cancer and rotting teeth on cigarette packets. And what actually happened is it increased smoking, because anything that reminds you of something that you're addicted to makes you want to do it. But it obviously didn't make people take up smoking from new, but smokers themselves, if they were reminded of smoking, wanted to smoke more.
Of course.
It's therefore exactly the same issue if you persecute any group. For instance, yesterday I heard someone on LBC talk about, he was Jewish, and he said, I'm Jewish, but I'm really not very religious at all. But I'll tell you what, I've got a lot more religious recently. Same thing with Muslims. 20, 30 years ago, you could go to Riyadh and all the Muslims would be walking around in T-shirts and jeans. Now they're all wearing thobes and burqas. The reason is the more you persecute them, the more you remind them to be more Muslim. Same with Tommy Robinson. Now, the more he's persecuted, the more you'll remind him and his followers of their cause. It will be far more effective psychologically to simply ignore him, unless, of course, he's doing something completely unacceptable.
Of course, and this is what happened with Donald Trump. I mean, you had, I said right at the beginning, and I said even the day before the election, when someone actually asked me that he was going to get elected, and they said, really, well, the polls are against him? And I said, yeah, because you've got all the silent voters, because you've got all the moderate people who are tired of this political correctness. They're tired of how things are going. They're keeping silence and then just and then they just acted by voting. Now, what's happening with the Tommy Robinson situation is that all the people, and because the thing is, I'm not a fan of Tommy Robinson, I'm not sure I like what he represents. It's not even what he represents, but how he represents it, or how he says it. And the thing is, when you've got the likes of this big protest on Downing Street on Sunday, when you've got all these people who turned up going, oh, Tommy.
But he looks aggressive.
He looks aggressive.
The problem.
You got all these, almost like comes across this horde of what looked like football hooligans. Whether they weren't or not, it doesn't matter. That's the perception that they created. It shows a lack of. It shows it shows white supremacy. It shows racism. It shows hatred. But the thing is, what's happening is a lot of the moderates are getting on board, because what they're seeing is a lot of unfairness. It seems to be one rule for one and another rule for another. And the thing is, while we've been blinded by the illusion of democracy, it's never really been there. This has always happened. All the government have done is expose it to people who are now thinking, actually, we're not going to get a fair deal. We're not going to get a fair trial if it's us against someone else, because of who you know, how the lawyer is, and how much noise you're actually making. Now, I understand we don't really have a freedom of speech law in this country, but we do have certain space to be able to behave in certain ways, and he hasn't done anything wrong. Yet what's happened is, if you brand someone long enough by calling him, they're calling Tommy Robinson this far right wing.
It's anchoring, isn't it? As you like and saying.
It is anchoring. I don't know whether
you believe what you hear if it's repeated long enough. Did you know my name isn't Theo?
Your name isn't Theo.
No.
What's your name?
It's not Theo.
It's Theodore.
No, it's not Theodore either.
Okay. What is your name then?
George.
George, is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stick with Theo.
No, it's George.
Okay. I didn't know that. But if you tell someone, exactly.
No, I am quite serious actually. It is George.
No, I'm sure you are. And your point is?
The point is, if I look serious and genuine enough, you will believe that blatant. At least you'll question yourself. You think, really? Well, it will go from 100% disbelief to and that's the problem. Once you have a professional doing it in court, or the media doing it repeatedly, you're a goner.
Of course, and that's how people will brand you. Whether he is not, I don't know. But it's how our government have behaved. And they're now caught between a rock and a hard place, because I think that this has backfired on them significantly. Because now they can't really release them, because they'll just come across as even weak, and they bow to public pressure, and they can't be seen to be doing that. Yet on the other hand, they've created far more noise than they've ever actually wanted to deal with on that matter. So now what's happening is a lot of people are anchoring the other way, because now Tommy Robinson's in prison, and having been beaten up in prison the last time, what happens is they're saying is, oh, he's not going to survive in prison, he's going to get murdered in prison. The more you say that, all of a sudden the government are going to say, do you know something, if something does happen to him, we're going to get slammed. So what happened is they're now going to have to put him in some form of protective custody to protect him, which is exactly what the tactic was. Say it often enough, and he will be protected. But also put the message out there that the government want him murdered.
And of course, he'll be there, still communicating with the outside world. It's a bit like Julian Assange. You couldn't get a better place for him to be in. Apart from in an embassy where he's still free to expose everyone and communicate with everyone, although they did try and cut off his Wi-Fi, didn't they?
Yeah. Do you know what? Theresa May had a promising start in politics, and I was actually quite keen to see her perform. However, she's just fallen so short on leadership strategy in so many areas. I think she's done more damage than anything